Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're happy to have you joining us today from wherever you are signing on from. This webinar is being broadcast to you live, and we will be recording the presentation as well. So if you have anyone locally, any colleagues or friends who would like to catch up later, we will make sure to send everything to you later on. But we are very glad to have you with us. We hope you've got a comfortable chair, perhaps a hot cup of tea or coffee, and we're looking forward to getting started. Some quick logistical information before we get started. If you've joined us before for a webinar, all of these things will be familiar to you, but if not, we wanted to make sure. So if you're an audience member with us today, we have you on mute to help us minimize background noise and so forth. But we do want to hear from you with your questions throughout the webinar and at the end for our Q&A period. So if there are questions you think of at any time, please feel free to write in using the question box in the panel at the right of your screen. And in that control panel, you'll also find a section with handouts, and these are available to you to download at any time during the presentation. These are from our panelists who will be joining us today, and they're happy to give these resources to you as part of their presentation, and they'll be referring to them later on as they speak to us. And as I said, we'll share all information with you afterwards. And if you are on social media, we would love for you to tweet with us. Our hashtag for webinars is ProsperWebinar, and we ourselves are on Twitter at ProsperCan. Here at Prosper Canada, we are a not-for-profit charity working with partners in all sectors to ensure that Canadians have access to financial programs, products and services, and advice that they need to build their financial well-being. We envision a future in which all vulnerable Canadians have access to free, high quality, and unbiased financial information, education, and support when they need it. So we certainly see savings and asset building programs like the ones you're going to hear about today as a key part of this vision. Prosper Canada's programming in financial literacy and financial coaching is part of the great work of the Canadian Centre for Financial Literacy, which is co-founded and supported by TD Bank Group. We have a great agenda for you today over the next hour. Both of our speakers are doing work right now in the financial empowerment field in Canada, and they're going to tell us about the different ways that they approach savings, helping people on low incomes to save money. And you're going to hear two very different but compatible perspectives on this. So Dean Estrella from Momentum in Calgary is going to tell us about some programs that they've structured specifically around different ways to help people save. And then John Cockburn from Counselling Sudbury is going to tell us more about those really personal one-on-one kind of habits and behaviors that can be very useful day to day and actually helping that savings behavior come to life in someone's world, given their budget and given their day-to-day reality. And then we'll close with a few minutes for Q&A. So that's our agenda today. So welcome to our panelists. We're so happy to have Dean and John with us today. Dean Estrella is the Financial Empowerment Manager of Asset Building at Momentum, which is a change-making organization based in Calgary, Alberta, combining social and economic strategies to reduce poverty. He is a dedicated social worker with a strong focus on partnering with low-income individuals and community agencies to reach sustainable goals. John Cockburn is the Financial Empowerment Coordinator at Credit Counselling Sudbury. So he joins us in this role, having been there for just over a year as Financial Empowerment Coordinator, but he has a much longer history as a credit counselor at Credit Counselling Sudbury, and he brings a great deal of enthusiasm for this work with his clients in many different contexts. So we're very happy to have them with us today. And finally, I'm Glenna Harris. I'm the Manager of Learning and Training here at Prosper Canada. And I've been here for a little over 3 years and have previous experience with community agencies and adult education. And this is part of our great work we do to support educational topics in the field. Both Momentum and Credit Counselling Sudbury are part of our Financial Empowerment Champions projects here at Prosper Canada. And these programs both support leading community and not-for-profit organizations and partners in communities across Ontario and Canada, and they include programming across several different interventions, including financial coaching and counseling, financial education, as well as tax filing. And you're going to hear more about that work from Dean and John today. But we want to take a moment to recognize these projects and their great support and amazing work they do across the country. So now that you've heard a little bit about our speakers, we'd love to know a little bit more about you and find out what kind of work you do from whatever part of the country you're joining us from. So first, if you'd like to tell us what kind of ways that you use to help people save in the work that you do. Do you do a one-on-one financial coaching program or counseling? Do you do financial literacy education? Do you have any match savings programs or similar types of programs? Do you have a tax time savings program? Or perhaps something else that we haven't listed here, if you'd like to let us know in the question box what that other might be. Perhaps it's a education savings program or some other kind of savings project that's very important to your local community. So I'll leave this poll open for about 15 more seconds. So we'll leave it at 4 or 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so I'll close the poll. So this is impressive. We can see that half of you are doing coaching or counseling projects, but also the majority of you are doing financial education workshops of various kinds. And we've got many of you are also doing different tax time or match savings programs. And many of you are doing something else that's very unique. So it looks like there's quite a lot of different savings programs or savings supports going on across the country. We have someone writing in that they're doing trustee and guardianship work for children. That's an amazing program. Thank you for telling us that. And we have one final poll. Our panelists would love to know a little bit more about you personally. Would you like to tell us if you yourself have a savings account? Is saving a behavior that you engage in your everyday life? Perhaps yes, no, or no, but you are planning to get one. All right, so I'll leave this open for 15 more seconds. And I'll close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So Dean and John, you'll be pleased to know that the majority of people listening in today do have savings accounts. So you're speaking to an audience who has adopted some savings behavior themselves, which is wonderful to know. So thank you very much for sharing those poll results with us. And we know that Dean and John are going to tell us more about the kind of work that they do in these different ways. Just before we get to them, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a few points about why savings behavior is so valuable. especially given that there are different ways that people experience savings and the different kind of ways they experience a need for savings. This year, the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada conducted its first survey of financial well-being in Canada, and the results were released very recently, this past month. In this research, they defined financial well-being as the extent to which people are able to comfortably meet all of their commitments and needs financially while still having resilience for the future. And their findings show that savings is one of the most important behaviors that supports financial well-being. That people who practice this kind of behavior have higher levels of resilience because they're less concerned about those potential emergencies in the future, and they're able to manage their spending day to day because they have that savings cushion. It's also important, not just for people living with low income, but for people living with fluctuating income to be able to have a savings cushion to look for when times are tough. And also, if you have a fluctuating income, you can look for those spikes in the year when income is higher, and that can help you build those cushions when the dips come along. And there are so many different reasons to save, and these could be quite personal depending on the individual or the household. Emergency savings is one of the most important, especially in light of this recent research from FCAC. But that ability to be able to cover a sudden expense that was not predicted, that can be really important to have a savings buffer to rely on, because that means that you won't have to go into borrowing any money to cover that expense. So it's not only about having the money now, but not having to rely on debt later. So emergency savings, as well as having those seasonal expenses that might crop up once or twice a year, managing everyday expenses so you don't have to rely on credit cards to do that. And then, of course, there's any number of longer-term savings goals. So your retirement planning, your large purchases, or saving for your education or for your child's education. So there's a lot of great reasons to save, and I know that Dean and John are going to tell us more about the ways that we can help that happen. So I'm pleased to introduce Dean Estrella first, and he's going to tell us all about the match savings programs that they do at Momentum. So Dean, I'd love for you to take it away.
Thank you, Glenna. Thank you, everyone, for having me, and to Prosper Canada for being such great partners and for hosting the webinar. I've called my presentation today "When Given the Opportunity to Save," and I'll reference that again at the very end of it. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through. So next slide, please. So just really quickly to mention what Momentum is, we're a nonprofit in Calgary. We've been around since 1992, working with people living on low incomes to move them out of poverty, essentially, or to create a thriving local economy. We have had we continue to have our skills training department, our business development department, and in 1999 we started our financial literacy department, and that includes 5 of our match savings programs for people living on low incomes. And those match savings programs continue to exist today, and they're kind of some of our signature programs here. And they range for people as youth, specifically for families. We have a homeowners program specifically for people with really financial vulnerabilities, and another one for just a stable low-income individuals that are trying to get ahead. In 2007, we started our financial literacy train-the-trainer program, helping other organizations to do this work, and there's been 180 agencies that have been trained since then. And then in 2015, we started training other organizations to run match savings programs, which I'll talk about later on. And then I'll also talk about a new program that we started in 2018, really capitalizing on the idea that a lot of people at tax time receive a big refund, and there's a missed opportunity there for them to actually save that amount of money. So we've come up with this innovative idea here. Next slide, please. So let me just kind of talk about the basics of what a match savings program is, or the technical name of them is called an individual development account, or an IDA program. So I'll use that acronym every now and then here. So essentially, a low-income participant that comes in and applies through the program, we check all their financial stability at the moment and their current financial situation. And if they do join the program, we're asking the participant to go to their own bank of their own choice and open up a savings account. And in that savings account, they're going to choose to save anywhere from $5 to $50 per month. And so I'd just like to mention, I'm highlighting a 6-month program here at Momentum. And in your slides there, or sorry, in your handouts available, there's something called the Match Savings Chart 2018. If you download that chart, that actually goes over all of the different programs we have at Momentum. But I'm just going to highlight the 6-month program because that's typically the one that all the other agencies in Calgary have adopted as their own program design. So anyways, back to the participant savings. At the end of 6 months, that participant would save $300 maximum in their bank account. So then throughout the 6-month period, we're also asking participants to come to financial literacy workshops on a very part-time basis. And so these workshops cover all of our core money management workshops on budgeting and banking, credit, etc. And then we also allow participants to choose elective options for themselves, and they can choose from investing, insurance, wills and estates, retirement planning, etc. And then at the end of the program is when we provide the match savings to the participant. And the money doesn't go directly to them, but it's going to go towards one of these assets that would be used to further their life moving forward. So in this example, we're providing a 3-to-1 match. So that would be $900 coming from Momentum or the agency. And that's a combined total of $1,200. And so at the beginning of the program, we're talking to participants about setting a financial goal. They're going to be saving money every single month towards one of these important things that could really help them move forward in life, such as education for themselves or their spouse, tools for work. We allow people to put $500 into an emergency fund or a resiliency fund. Again, really just expressing the importance of having an ongoing savings cushion. An RESP, they can put the money into their children's education. And then there's a list of other assets that they could use, again, in that chart that you have. So next slide, please. So some of the outcomes that we've set out for the program are listed here. And so increased money management skills, I'd like to say that these start to happen on a really practical level, right? If you're asking a participant to come into a program and save every single month, and for them to set up a financial goal that they're going to have to achieve in a certain number of months, they're going to really start to make sure that they're actually doing the things that they're learning in the classroom. And so we see that often happen. Then I talk here about positive relationship with money, increased confidence, financial wellness, etc. And so oftentimes that's actually one of the most important things that comes out of the program. Participants come out of the program saying, you know, the money for the program was the carrot for me to join. But after I realized how important the education and this increased feeling that I have around my money. We just recently did a focus group with some of our past Saving Circles participants, and many of them talked about this new confidence they have with money. It doesn't matter how much money they're making, if they're earning minimum income or if they're earning government benefits as their income. It doesn't matter because they feel like they're in control of it. And that often, in many ways, is a huge outcome for these programs. Of course, developing the pattern of a savings pattern for a lifelong period is a really important outcome of the program. And then the next slide, we'll talk about the assets for future sustainability. So next slide, please. So we often show this graph or this pictorial to participants that are joining the program and really try to explain to them, similar to what Glenna has just done, about the importance of savings. And we believe that income is one aspect. So this quote here by Ray Bashar says, without an income, you can't get by, but without assets, you can't get ahead. And, you know, many participants come into the program thinking, well, I want to save money for a house and I want to save money for this big item. And we often have to remind participants that they need to start going things step by step. And so by building a savings cushion in the beginning, making sure they're meeting their basic needs, and then starting to look at ways where they can really move themselves forward, such as education or whatever. Our main goal of our match savings programs, and it's actually our vision for Momentum, is that everyone has a sustainable livelihood. And so they'll always have something to fall back on. They've built enough assets in their life that all the bumps and fluctuations in their life will keep them hopefully at a stable place. And so really a match savings program is an asset building and a poverty reduction approach. Next slide, please. So John, who's going to be presenting next, he's going to talk a lot about some one-on-one tips and tricks around savings. And these things that I've presented here are really from a program perspective when you're working with a cohort or a group classroom setting. And so in an IDA program, these come really useful. And so again, because it is in a cohort level, the peers themselves act as motivators for themselves. They act as almost like a peer support group for themselves. They start talking about, last week after class, I went home and I talked to my utility company and I renegotiated the prices. Because of so-and-so, I've found this resource, or I took upon this referral and I've been able to do that. And because of so-and-so talking about their bank account, I went and changed my bank account, and I went in and I spoke to the banker and asked them 100 questions about why I'm getting all these service charges. And so that support and encouragement from a peer level is probably one of the biggest aspects of the program. The facilitator obviously is providing encouragement all along the way. I used to do something called financial celebrations at the beginning of every class, asking people what have they accomplished in the last month. And even if it's just something as small as I didn't spend $10 on lunch on Wednesday, that was a thing that we would clap for because it was a big achievement for that one person. So other things that we do in the IDA programs is that we provide bonuses. We can incentivize people. If they get their credit report, they can get a bonus. But if they actually save consecutively, for example, 5 out of 6 months, they would receive a bonus. We also just have free giveaways to encourage people to keep coming to class and to do little contests here and there. Every month we're providing a account statement or their balance updates with their amounts plus the amount coming from their match savings so they can see the total, which also keeps them motivated. We also provide a chance for participants to make up deposits. And so if they've missed a deposit in 1 month, we don't want people to feel penalized or for people to feel ashamed. We want to allow them to be able to miss a deposit, but also give them the opportunity to make up a missed deposit if they need to. Regular reminders is also really important, is really from a behavioral economics perspective. And then we also provide minimum and maximum amounts of savings. So in the example I've given, it's anywhere from $5 to $50 per month. In one of the following slides, I'm going to show that 94% of participants typically save to the maximum. And so it's always really interesting when you provide this idea of like, okay, well, you can do $5 or you can do $50. People are going to go to the higher one because they know they're going to be getting a higher match. And so people really strive to reach the maximum. And it's okay if they don't, though. And lastly, we then try to talk to people about stretch goals. And so if you can't save, the minimum amount, or if you can only save the minimum amount, maybe next month you can save a little more. Or if you're saving the maximum amount, maybe next month you can save a little more. And also, again, just really keeping people forefront with their financial goals. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to talk about the work that we've been doing with other organizations in Calgary. Momentum is one of 4 leading partners within the Aspire Calgary Financial Empowerment Collaborative here. We're working with over 25 organizations to do financial empowerment interventions, but we are the lead of the match savings, and so we started training other organizations to do this type of work. And so since 2015, there's now 12 organizations in Calgary doing the work. And really, our goal was to really support them, and we did that with developing a toolkit. We provided 2-day training to organizations, etc. And we have a community of practice where we get together on a regular basis and talk about best practices, any challenges, and really support each other at a practitioner level. I'd like to mention as well that if there's any organizations that are out there that are interested in doing a match savings program, we can provide this toolkit if you just want to email me after the webinar or in the coming days. And then I also want to mention too that a lot of people think that funding is a big barrier to having a match savings program, and of course it is. And sometimes funding can be actually easy to find for match savings programs, but if that is a barrier for you, I'd also like to recommend that you can have your own savings program in your organization without the match. And so all of these ideas that we've just talked about can still incentivize a group, even if it's just giveaways or whatever. But if you have a language class, like an English class, if you've got an employment program, providing this aspect of savings at the beginning of the group and saying, okay, well, for the next 6 months, we're going to encourage everyone to save, and we're going to set some financial goals for you all and have that peer support. It's quite achievable to do within your programming. Next slide, please. So of all these match savings that we have in Calgary, here are some results that we've had from 2017. I won't go over them in detail. One that I will talk about, though, is the one at the bottom. It says 97% of program alumni continue to save each month. And so we did a reach back in a few years ago with all of our youth match savings participants, and we were really delightfully pleased to see that many of them continue to save. And again, it really is this lifelong behavior that we're trying to instill into the participants, and it's so great to see that many have walked away continuing to save. And I'd also like to mention too, it's not necessarily about the amount, it's more about the behavior. So whether they are only saving $20 per month or they're saving $200 per month, the fact that they're continuing to save is probably the more important aspect of it, because it's the behavior. Next slide, please. And then I just want to talk about impact in real life. And so I've kind of said already that many participants walk away with this confidence and hope for the future. This is a note from one of our participants that graduated from our Owen Hart Homeowners Program. I want to thank you personally and the Momentum team for making our dream come true, and for your continued support during these years at Momentum for inculcating the art of saving, saving, saving. I will never forget where I started as a part-time cook helper at a restaurant, barely able to pay the rent, and now I own a house. Unbelievable. So two things I'd like to highlight there is that he mentions these years. And so again, you know, many participants can't get a house at the snap of a finger, and the saving thing is a lifelong behavior that has been developed there. And also too that, you know, a house isn't necessarily the end all be all, but it is a big asset that can be achievable for people living on low incomes. Next slide, please. So I just want to transition now to the new program that we've developed this year called Tax Time Savings in partnership with ATB Financial here in Alberta. ATB is our banking partner as well as one of the sponsors of the program, and then as well as a bunch of other organizations listed at the bottom there that are running tax clinics through our Financial Empowerment Collaborative. Really, this came about late last year. We were thinking about, well, what can we do, because we have all these tax clinics happening in Calgary, and is there a way to incentivize people to save their money? And we learned of the program called SaveUSA from the United States through the CFE fund, how they have been running their SaveUSA program exactly almost as we've developed ours. So if we can just go to the next slide. The way that the Tax Time Savings Program works, which is very similar then to the SaveUSA model, is that if you attend a free tax clinic and you file your taxes, and you get a refund of at least $200, and if you're living on a low income, you'd be eligible to join the Tax Time Savings Program. And so from that point forward, you would open up an ATB financial savings account and deposit a portion of your refund, anywhere from $200 to $1,000, into your ATB account. And then you just simply leave it there for 1 year, and you're going to be matched at a 50% rate. So that'd be $500 after 1 year's time. Next slide, please. As we were developing the program, the SaveUSA model was really this low-touch model, and it's a big walk away from what we're used to from our traditional match savings programs. And so we added some of these optional things in here so that it still has some aspects of the traditional IDA program. And so people can have the option of attending financial literacy classes and earn an extra $100 bonus. And we also provided 2 different savings milestones or deadlines, essentially, where they can deposit their first $200 by June 30th, and they can make it up to the maximum amount by October 31st. So again, I'm playing on that minimum and maximum features that we spoke about earlier. And it's so interesting to see how the deadlines are really effective when getting people to submit their deposits in there. People can definitely withdraw their money. So we recognize that life happens and they may need to access that money. And so it's not locked away forever. They would just simply need to walk into ATB Financial and withdraw the money in person. And of course, then there's the chance that they would lose out on the matching dollars. And then lastly, unlike a traditional IDA program, there's no savings goal enforced where they'd have to use it towards education or whatnot. But we're hoping that throughout the year, through email messages and financial literacy tips, or if they do attend the classes, we're instilling some bits of knowledge and bits of coaching in there for them to hopefully use that money wisely. So next slide, please. So I just said October 31st was the deadline, and because it is our first year, we're still only halfway through our preliminary pilot year. And so we've had some great results thus far. And one that I'll just really point you at is the last one, is that 125 savers have enrolled into the program and are saving collectively $130,000. And so we're quite pleased with that. And we feel that there are some other there are some other, sorry, there's a speakerphone happening here at my work.
Oh, that's
Anyway.
okay, Dean. We understand.
So anyways, 125 savers saving at this amount of money. And so again, I just like to point out this one quote from one of the intake surveys that we had, where the participant said, it gives me an opportunity to save for a family vacation, something that our family has never experienced. And so if we just think about that for a second, that's really impactful, because it's something we so often take for granted. And by utilizing something like a savings program like this to do that is hopefully impactful for the family. One other couple thing I just want to say about this is, now that we're kind of at the end of this program year, or the first year, we're running into now season 2, because the tax season is coming up, and Momentum is thinking of ways that, this program is so great, and in the United States, they've found a way to they're trying to find ways to elevate it at a government level. And Momentum at the same time is also trying to do that, thinking, how can the government of Canada incentivize savings, potentially at tax time as well? And so hopefully we're going to be doing some talks with the CRA or FCAC, et cetera, to maybe move some of this work at a federal level as well. Last slide, please. And so that really just concludes my portion here. And again, there's that thing I said at the beginning. Michael Sheridan is, we call the godfather of the IDAs, who started them in 1990s in the United States. And through all of his work, they've concluded that when given the opportunity, people on low incomes can and do save. And so again, if an organization is out there thinking, like, what can we do to help participants save more money? Often when you start introducing these, and if you incentivize it in some way, people will often take those opportunities. So I'll just end on that note. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean. That was just a wealth of information, and thank you for your generosity in sharing all these wonderful program details, as well as those handout resources with us. And for everyone listening, as Dean said, his contact information is there, so please be in touch with him if you're curious to find out more about that toolkit he mentioned, or any other details about the programs. We're going to have the contact information for all of our panelists available at the end, just after our Q&A period. We do have a couple of questions coming in already, but I'm going to hold them for our last 10 minutes, because I want to make sure we have a good amount of time for John to speak as well. So as I said, we have two great presenters talking about savings from very different perspectives, and John's going to really give us a lens on those kinds of habit-forming behaviors that he works with his clients on in different settings. So welcome, John. Take it away.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me. I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about the different approaches we use to teach people about saving and budgeting on the one-on-one level or the group level. Taking advantage of match savings programs and other programs that are out there are great, but I'm here today to talk a little bit about what I do and what I find most effective when talking to people about savings one-on-one. So I am the Financial Empowerment Coordinator with the Sudbury Community Service Center. I've been here for about a year, like Glenn has said, and I do a lot of one-on-one savings coaching, as well as group coaching outside of the agency, going to different places and teaching people about savings, which could potentially be for the first time they've ever heard talk about this. The services that we offer, they're client-centered, client-oriented, they're free, and they're unbiased. We don't pick one program over another. We don't charge for what we do. We're here to help the client achieve their financial goals and choose the direction that's best for them. We do one-on-one budget counseling here at the agency, which is free, like I said, and we do a lot of group sessions, which includes budget basics as well as credit education. And for the most part, the group sessions that I do, sometimes it's these people, it's their first exposure to budgeting and the idea and the notion of saving. Next slide, please. So I decided to put a lot of Bruce Lee quotes in this and try to keep it light and interesting, because sometimes talking with people about budgeting can be a little bit of a dry subject and not really things that people tend to want to talk about. And this quote from Bruce Lee, "The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus." I like to use that when I'm talking about budgeting and saving, because that's really all it takes, is a little bit of know-how, but staying on target, staying with that laser-like focus to keep things going and moving forward. Next slide, please. So the first thing you have to do with savings that I tell the people that I'm talking with and teaching is the budget. Everything hinges on the budget. It is the cornerstone of everything that we do here at the agency. And a quick rundown, basically, number one, you have to determine what your monthly income is, how much money you're making, estimate how much you're spending per month, and in the handouts that I provided, the budget sheet is exactly for that. Write down what you think you're spending on all the items per month. And then the next part, the most important part, is to track your monthly spending for two full pay periods. So if you're getting paid every 2 weeks for 4 weeks solid, there is no better way to understand where the money is going unless you track it. I've never once had anybody successfully do this, and a lot of people do give up on the tracking because it is difficult and it takes a lot of focus and a lot of commitment. But anybody who does stick with it, not once has anybody come back and said it was a waste of time. Every one of them has had an aha moment where they're realizing, maybe for the first time, wow, I didn't realize I was spending this much money on whatever it is, on buying a magazine, on eating lunch out at work, on whatever the different things are. And this is the first step to recognizing where things can change so that you can save. Like Dean was saying earlier, sometimes it's only $5 a month. And you might think $5 a month is not a lot, but that's $60 a year at the end of the year. That might be the difference between a Christmas gift that your child wants and one that you can afford. $60 might be that. It might be a dinner out for you and your partner. It could be a whole bunch of things, and $60 can add up very quickly. So we like to stress that even the smallest amount of savings makes the biggest difference. Next slide, please. The next step about the budget, especially after tracking the expenses, is identifying wants and needs. I tell my clients that they're really basically, you have three needs. You need food, you need shelter, and you need clothing. Those are the three things that you absolutely must have. The rest kind of fluctuate between needs and wants. For me, I live 25, 30 minutes out of town, no bus service. I need a vehicle to get to work. But for other people who are living downtown with reliable transit and have a vehicle that really just parks there and doesn't use it, it may not be a need at that point, it may be a want. I've used coffee up here as an example. It seems to be one that everybody can identify with. But if you're spending $2 a day at a coffee shop versus 67 cents a day brewing it at home and bringing it to work in a Contigo, you're spending $720 a year for coffee at $2 a day versus $245 a year making it yourself. So that's a savings of $475 a year. And these are the points that I like to use when I'm talking to people about saving, is because they don't realize how much they're spending on all the different little areas of their life. And once we get them to track those, the budget and the spending, we can start to identify areas that we can change, that we can focus that money or some of the money toward building a savings account, building an emergency fund, or just having the extra money to put in toward a purchase or something like that, some goal you want to reach. Next slide, please. So a few things that I talk to the clients that I see with. Number one, pay yourself first. What that basically means, if you don't already know, is that we want people to make savings like a bill, like something that has to be done. You have to pay yourself first. Pay into the savings before you spend what's left over, before you start going out to lunch or buying coffees or buying magazines or whatever it may be. Treat your savings as a bill that has to be paid. Some of the things that I've listed here that really hit home for a lot of our clients is using visual reinforcement, like a jar on a shelf, or an email that comes from your savings account saying, you know, when a new deposit was made or what the balance is. Save your loose change. Canada is very much a jingling kind of money nation. Our money is slowly turning into what we consider change, and we all grew up with quarters, nickels, and dimes, and it was not real money. It was just change that your grandparents gave you, or you took to the store to buy candy or whatever it was. But slowly, change is now loonies and toonies. And some things that I tell my clients, you know, a dime doesn't seem like a lot, and probably a lot of people would just pass a dime if they saw it on the street or left it at home on their dresser. But if you get a 2-liter bottle of pop and fill it full of dimes, that'll add up to over $500. And it's a great visual reinforcement. You can put that on a shelf and watch it grow. My grandmother used to collect teapots, and when she passed away, we went and cleaned out her place and started organizing everything. and I picked up a teapot, and the teapot was no bigger than a regular sized teapot, but it was so heavy that when I picked it up, I almost broke off the handle. So when we opened it, it was filled with toonies. And we thought, okay, let's count this up. And a regular sized teapot, nothing special, had over $4,000 in toonies in it. She had been collecting toonies, who knows for how long, and just that little bit of change that she felt wasn't real money added up very quickly. The next one is one that I adhere to, is give yourself an allowance. Friends of mine laugh, you know, you're 45 years old and you have an allowance, but it allows me to spend without having guilt, without having the worry that I went over the budget. I know what my budget is. It's in my pocket. It's cash in my pocket. That's my allowance. And when that money's gone, I'm done spending. So if I want to have lunch out, if I want to buy a coffee or a magazine, whatever it is I want to do, once the money's gone, it's gone. We encourage our clients to wait before they make a large purchase. Wait 2 or 3 days. Sometimes these purchases that we make are impulse purchases. They're purchases that we make to make ourselves feel better. And if we had just waited a day or two, chances are the urge to buy whatever is going to pass. So if we can encourage our clients to do that, that's a great thing too. Packing a lunch versus eating out, another really great way to save some money. Eating out a lunch is a lot more expensive and chances are a lot less healthy than just packing your own lunch from home. Make a list and stick to it. This goes for grocery shopping, goes for any kind of shopping, Christmas gift purchases, whatever it may be. Having a list and sticking to the list avoids the temptation of buying those impulse purchases when you're there. Gives you great motivation, that visual reinforcement of what you need to buy and sticking to it. And the last two are really important. Number one, avoid accumulating more debt. The more debt that you have, the more of your disposable income is going toward payments, and tackling current debt so that those current debts, those current payments will eventually subside or reduce so that you're not paying as much on those debts and hopefully have the debts paid off in full. Now, likely this is things that everybody here has heard before, but these are the things that really hit home for our clients, that really drive the point that every little bit helps and a little bit of savings can go a long way. Next slide, please. We talk about saving money and we can cut corners. There's really two different things you can do to balance your budget or to come up with money for savings. Is either, number one, you can make more money, or number two, you can spend less money. And chances are, for a lot of my clients, they don't have the opportunity to make more money. They're already making as much as they can in the situation that they're in. So we focus on spending less money. And with everybody having a smartphone, there's some great apps out there that you can use that will save you money or even make you a little money. Flip on the top left corner is a great app. It's free, and it allows you to show the flyer, show the cashier the flyer where something is cheaper at a different store, and you can price match at certain stores. Statistics are showing in 2016, I think it was, that price matching can save over 10% per shopping trip. So if you're spending $200 at Walmart, that's $20 that you're saving that can stay in your account or go towards savings account for later. PC Plus is another really popular one. Some people think, well, you know, I'm just collecting points, and I used to do it, and my friends, when I go shopping, they'd come with me. We were picking up, you know, stuff for the guys' night out, and they'd say, well, how many points did you get? Like 15 points or 20 points? And I was like, yeah, but how many points did you get? You got none. So if you don't take advantage of it, and it's a free service, eventually those points will add up. It's not like they expire, and that's something that you can use toward getting a little extra money. Gas Buddy is an app I use quite a bit. If you're driving a vehicle, it's great to find the cheapest gas, and this will tell you where it is so that if you're planning your commute to or from work, you can stop where the gas is the cheapest. And Checkout 51 is another great one. This one actually does pay you money. It requires a little bit of work, but it's a great app to check out where you can submit receipts of things that you bought and build up credit with them. And once the credit is high enough, they will actually send you money, a real check that you can cash for money back. And if you're already doing the shopping anyway, you already have a smartphone, this is like what people call a side hustle, things you can do on the side to make a little bit of extra money to go in toward, hopefully, that savings account. Next slide, please. So I had a few quotes. We do a lot of feedback surveys from the groups, and these are just 5 of the ones that really had an impact with me. Number 1 was watching my kids learn about savings. Well, I did, made me realize I had never been taught this skill as a child. I felt like I was preparing them to be an adult. And that really hit home to me, because then I thought about it. I wasn't taught how to save or how to budget as a child either. It was something I had to learn the hard way in university, digging myself out of credit card debt. Another one was just saving $50 a month made it possible for Christmas to happen. And this family had, been relying on food banks and toy drives and things like that. And they had such a huge boost of confidence when they were able to pay for Christmas themselves, having $600 at the end of the year for Christmas. Another client had told me building savings became fun and very rewarding, and they continued it after. And like Dean was saying, a lot of the alumni from his program, I think 97%, had continued saving. And once you build that culture into someone, build almost like that habit, they start to really enjoy doing it and really find it rewarding. Using cash instead of credit has changed my whole outlook on spending. This was somebody that was always tap and go with their credit card, with their debit card. And we had talked about going to what I'm on, basically a cash allowance system. But yeah, it really turned his outlook around on how he was spending his money and allowed him to start saving in a different way. And another one was not buying lunch with the women at work was hard at first, but soon my savings account was growing, and that made it all worthwhile. And that seems to be the hardest part when talking with clients or groups. It's about, keeping up with everybody else and the perception that everybody else has of you. But savings is something that's very personal, something that you have to, a goal that you need to strive toward, and something that you want to achieve. And as soon as you can put aside what other people are thinking about it and focusing on what you want to achieve, it then becomes a lot easier. Next slide, please. So the final thing I have here is another Bruce Lee quote, but basically it's just saying it's not the daily increase, but a daily decrease that matters. Hack away at the inessentials. And that's what we teach our clients to do, is not so much about increasing your income so much, but decreasing what you're spending and getting rid of those inessentials. If you're buying books all the time, maybe it's time to join a library, a local library. If you have a gym membership that you're just not using but you're paying for every month, which I'm sure we know people that have that, it's time to make those changes. Is it time to get rid of the landline at home because everybody in the house has a cell phone? Or is it time to maybe downgrade the cable package or something like that? It's getting rid of those inessentials that are going to make a huge difference to the savings. Next slide. I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. That was just marvelous hearing all your stories, and I can tell you, all of us here in the Prosper Canada office who have been listening in, I think we're all definitely thinking about teapots full of toonies right now, and what an impressive visual reminder that is to how much savings can add up even on very small amounts over time. So yeah, that was great. I really enjoyed hearing all those habits that you're talking about, all those tips, and as we said, we really want to open this up to everyone listening in to ask questions. If there's something you've been thinking about or something that our presenters have helped you think about, please type in a question in the question box. John, I wonder if we could start with a question with you. This is probably a familiar question for you. It's one that we also hear all the time, but what are your thoughts on this question about, is it really possible to save if you're someone living on a very low, very tight income? What's your response to that?
I work with a lot of people who live on Ontario Works or ODSP, and they are on a very low income, a very tight income. But after doing budget counseling with them, after getting them to track those expenses for a month, they always come around and see that, maybe they can save just $5 a month. And maybe $5 is all they can afford to do, but I've yet to have anybody who could track it come back and say that there was absolutely no way to save anything. They always find somewhere where they're stunned at the money they're spending where they didn't need to spend it. And if they're really focused on saving, I think there's always a means just to save even just a little bit.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that perspective, and thank you for that idea of $5 really does add up. That's a really that's so constructive, and I think very optimistic and very encouraging to take forward. Dean, we have a question for you about your match savings programs. Someone asking about how you select the participants. Do you have any kind of criteria or selection guidelines that you follow?
Sure, you bet. Yeah, so IDA programs are actually filled with a lot of different policies, especially for the eligibility. So one of the main factors is low income, and so we use the low income cutoff. So go chart to do the initial screening of income. Number two, we also take a look at assets and net worth. And so, for example, although someone might be earning an income of minimum wage, but they might own a house that's almost paid off, and so we would do that kind of ratio there. And then we also take a look at debt levels. And if a person has too much debt that would need to be addressed first before they actually can save, we would get them to we typically refer them to credit counselors or to money mentors here in Alberta to deal with some of their debt issues before they can actually save. We often say, like, we don't want people struggling to save $50 a month if they can barely even feed their family. So those are some of the main ones that we look at.
That's great. We have another question for you, Dean, about the match savings. Wondering if the income if the savings they build up from the match savings program, if that affects anyone who might be receiving welfare. If there's rules about spending allowances or housing allowances and so forth.
It actually all depends on what the item is and what it's going toward or how you're paying it. And so typically we're wanting to pay the money directly to the vendor. And so we never give the money directly to the participant unless it's a reimbursement. And so, for example, if the participant wants to use it towards a college, we typically get the receipt or the invoice from the college and we pay the college directly. And so in doing that, then the money is going into the hands of the participant. And then there are other ones. Sometimes if it is, like, for example, the emergency fund, or depending on what the item is, we sometimes have to provide a T4A slip or a a T5. I can't remember which T slip it is, but we're always following CRA guidelines. What we typically tell participants, though, is that it typically wouldn't affect, because it's often like an in and out when you're filing your taxes. But if they are receiving government benefits, to talk to their social worker or their benefits worker to let them know that they may be receiving this amount of money. But the years that we've done it, we haven't had any adverse reactions to things.
Great, thank you. John, we have a question for you because you mentioned that you do some workshops, but you also do the one-on-one support. Do you, in your program, is there an order that happens in? Do you typically see people first for a workshop and then the one-on-one, or does it matter?
It doesn't really matter, but typically, I guess I see them in a workshop first, because people are a lot more willing to talk about their sex life than they are about their money life. So I see them in a group session and they have a lot of questions and they want a lot more answers. So at that point, I just encourage them, maybe you need to come in and sit with a credit counselor one-on-one in private, confidentially, and talk about exactly what's going on. So I think, typically I see them in a group and I kind of spark their interest and get them thinking about things in different terms. And then they come in and see a credit counselor one-on-one. Now, that being said, we do have a ton of people who come in without ever having to go to a group. Just because they see us on the internet or on Facebook or something and come in for the one-on-one right off the bat. But in my experience, they do the group session first and then kind of segue into the one-on-one.
Okay. So it starts out, it's a little bit less pressure maybe, and then they can go for the more focused conversation.
Ease their toe into it, exactly.
Yeah. We have a follow-up question to that one, John. Do you have an amount of time in mind that's typical for how long the one-on-one session lasts?
Typically here it's about an hour.
Okay.
And that allows them to go over a detailed budget, a detailed list of their debts, and then talking about, okay, what are some options, where do we want to go, talking about the goals and how we're going to achieve those goals. So it's typically about an hour, maybe an hour and a half at the most, depending on the amount of questions the client might have.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dean, we have another question for you about your programs. Do you have, so we asked about the selection criteria earlier, but someone's also wondering, do they have to pass any kind of test or final, any kind of final step to complete the program?
No, we do it in a fun way. Like we do, so throughout every module, at the end, there's just some kind of like next steps for the participants, whether it is like writing down what they've learned or whatever. At the beginning of every class, we do some kind of like quizzing of follow-up, like, and it's typically just like this multiple choice at a classroom level. And in the very end, we just kind of like typically do kind of like a Jeopardy type quizzing of games, but there's no particular testing.
So you kind of quiz people, but it's fun. It's not a requirement necessarily.
No.
Yeah. That's great. Another question for you, Dean, while we're on you. Are people allowed to use the savings they build? Like, is there any kind of restriction on what they can use those savings for? For example, can they pay off debt with it? Can they use it for certain purchases? Is there any kind of restriction there?
Yeah, so it depends which one we're talking about. If we're talking about the tax time savings program, there's no restriction whatsoever. If they really wanted to, at the end of the 1 year, they can take the 500 or their combined amount and just run away with it. We're not going to enforce that. But with the IDA program, it is a list of items that they can only choose from. And so it cannot go towards debt. It cannot go towards transportation. It cannot go towards like a new TV, etc. And a lot of these policies are coming from the United States, the way that they've run them, and we have to adhere to them.
Okay. Okay, great. John, another question for you about the work you do. Is there any kind of like period of time that you limit yourself to when you're working with a client for the one-on-one support? Do you kind of set a, well, we'll end after 3 months or 6 months or anything like that, or is it very open-ended?
No, it's very open-ended. We're, like I was saying at the beginning, we're very client-driven. We've been doing this since 1972, not me personally, but the business, the agency, and we have budgeting clients that come in once, maybe twice a year, and then we never see them again. And we have some budgeting clients that come in once a month and have been for the last 17 years. It's all about how much assistance they need and how comfortable they are leaving when they're finally got all the information they need. We're here to help them every step of the way for as long as they need it.
That's wonderful. That's such a, as you say, it's a very client-centered approach to sort of work with their timeline as they need the goals to come in.
Yeah, and then some people need a lot more, guidance and a lot more encouragement than others, and we're there to provide that.
Dean, we've had a couple questions asking about your programs, because you mentioned about funding being quite a challenge sometimes to start up one of these programs. If you were to talk to someone about starting up a program like this for themselves, what would be your kind of recommendations for looking for funding sources?
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people have questions as to where, and I don't mind answering that to give credit to our funders. United Way of Calgary, an area, has been one of our staple funders for almost right from the beginning of our match savings programs. The City of Calgary FCSS is a big funder, and we also get a lot of private donations to do that. And so anyway, in promoting match savings, the impact or the outcomes themselves kind of sell the program. And so I think always leading with the big strategy of like, this is how impactful a match savings program can be is very often very appealing for the funders. And in many ways, it's almost very similar to like having charity dollars, because that money is not necessarily directly going to the participants, but it's going to these tangible items that a funder can typically conceptualize in their heads.
Right. Okay. So start with those good results and those outcomes and work from there.
You bet.
Yeah. So Dean and John, I'll just ask you if you have any other last words or last pieces of advice to give to our listeners. Dean?
Not really.
Sorry, I put you on the spot. That was a very...
I think it's really important to just always talk about savings, right? Just always bring it up as a reminder and to let people think that they can save, and without pushing people too far, but the idea that mentioning savings on a regular basis, it will remind people to save.
That's great. John, what would you say as a closing thought?
I just think that it doesn't matter how much you save as long as you are saving. And it could be even $1 or $2 here or there, a little bit a month. You know, a teapot full of toonies adds up very quickly, and maybe you don't look at that teapot for 6 or 7 years, but who in 6 or 7 years wouldn't love to have $4,000 in toonies? So
Very true.
every little bit helps, and there is no small amount that you can save. Every little bit helps.
That's perfect. I think that's such a wonderful note to end on. Thank you, John and Dean, for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. Thank you, everyone, all 75 of you who have been listening in today. We know your time is very valuable, and we thank you for sharing it with us today for this last hour. We look forward to speaking with you again on another webinar upcoming. Please be in touch with us, and please let us know if there are topics that you are interested in hearing more from us about. You'll receive a link from us in your email with all of the materials from today, as well as a survey to tell us what you liked and what you think we could improve and what else we could bring to you in future webinars. All the contact information for our speakers today is here, and we hope you'll be in touch with them if there's more you'd like to find out from them. And please stay in touch on our newsletter and our social media channels, where we'll be sure to tell you everything about our upcoming events in 2019. So thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and thank you for joining us.